Hello, my name is Teresa Arrowwood, and I'm the author of Standing in the Eye of the Storm and Stilling the Thunder. As promised with the release of the prologue of Stilling the Thunder, I'm going to be reading a piece out of Chapter 1. The day was cold, not to mention the fine mist of rain that fell. Sitting there among family, I felt numb. The pain that dwelled in my heart was beyond anything I had ever felt. I was oblivious to everything that surrounded me, except for the flag-draped casket that lay before me. The piercing sound of the gun salute was the only thing that had caused a reaction. Grayson sat with his arm around me, as did my own father, but I had little thought of anyone supporting me. I felt desperately alone and troubled without any chance of anything being normal again. Molly sat on my lap, unmoving, with her blanket wrapped around her. Her long dark hair flowed down her back in rings of curls. With her thumb in her mouth, she clung to me, and I to her. The child I carried and Molly were my only solace. They were the only part of him I had left. I hadn't even cried. I couldn't. I had promised him that I would take care of the lives entrusted to me. They were precious to him. And if I didn't care for them, who would? I had watched as they removed his body from the horse-drawn carriage he had been encased. Landon led the crew of 8 officers, their lines straight as arrows as they carried him to his rest. Beth sat unmoving, holding their son, awaiting her future husband to join her. I was angry that she had someone to comfort her when Carter was gone. I would never feel him hold me ever again. The guilt consumed me of the very idea. She had lost a brother, and Molly, her father. I wasn't the only one suffering, even though it's how I felt. Landon had taken his seat beside her, dressed in his dress blues. He looked stately and sat as straight and tall as an oak. His emotions lacked, but I knew he was deeply saddened by the loss of his friend, partner, and brother-in-law. The buzz from the overhead PA system had awakened me from the thoughts racing through my head. An unfamiliar voice called out as we sat there, still as stone. This had been part of their arrangement from the department. They did this for all their officers. The lone voice was haunting as it came across the dispatch system. All units stand by for broadcast. The line popped and cracked, then fell silent. The silence had a lost and eerie feel to it. The few minutes that had passed felt like hours. The voice broke the airwaves once more as they began to speak. Last call for Carter Blake. 629. 629. Officer Blake. Badge 629. End of watch. May 2, 2013. Officer Blake, you've completed your mission here, a good friend to all, a loving husband and father. We will remember your warm smile and compassion. You fought the good fight and finished the course. Now is the time to rest. All units break for a moment of silence. Again the silence ensued, breaking me into tiny pieces. Carter Elijah Blake, may you rest in peace, knowing your strength and passion lives on in your children, that your love lives on in your wife, and that your honor will live on in us all. Officer Blake, thank you for your service and ultimate sacrifice. You are clear to secure and remain with the Lord your God in peace. Officer Blake, this is your final call. That was it. All I could take. The silent tears ran down my face, uncaring of what others saw. My husband, the love of my life, was gone. and there was no bringing him back. I would have given anything just for him to tell me everything was going to be okay. His words came back to me as Pastor Conley concluded the service. Carter had come to me before he married his beautiful wife and spoke to me of some things he hadn't been able to understand. But he also told me that in what he had experienced in his life, he had tried to accept what God had done or was doing in his life without question. We don't know why God chose to take such a loving man from his family, but like him, we must accept it and learn not to question. God knows what is best, even though it doesn't seem so at the time. The hope we have is that we will see him again and never be separated. God bless you, my friend, until we are reunited in God's house. The guard folded the flag that rested on the casket and brought it to me. I caught a strange sensation as the officer placed it in my hands, and the familiar scent of Carter's cologne rose from the unsettling scene. The ID on the officer's uniform read Davis. It must be my imagination. He can't be here. It's impossible. Isabella, your mind is playing tricks on you. Once he had presented the flag, he saluted the family and the casket and took his place at the end of it. The family and friends had begun to file out, and I walked up to say goodbye once more. Molly had left with Beth, and I was glad to have the time alone with him. Gently, I ran my fingers along the edge, wishing for one last touch, one last kiss, and one last goodbye. Paying no attention to the guard at the end, I stood there trying to collect what thoughts I had of him before returning to the family. I needed this. What am I going to do without you? I whispered softly. Molly misses you already, and I know that I will carry you with me all of my life. Why didn't you say no? Why did you leave me? I can't do this without you. I dropped to my knees beside the casket. After 2 days of showing little emotion, the dam broke. Relieved, I was alone except for the lone guard and Pierce, who had been gracious enough to keep his distance. I just sat there broken. The chill in the air felt so cold. It was as if it went to the bone. In the state I was in, it had become hard to take a breath. My chest heaved as I poured out all the pain that had been trapped. My hand lay on the casket, and I shook in pain as if someone had stabbed me through the heart. They hadn't allowed me to see him, to say goodbye. Landon had explained that he was so badly disfigured that I didn't want to see that. It was better for me and Molly to have a closed casket. I love you so much. I had managed to speak through the tears and the knot in my throat that never seemed to go away. My hair fell forward against my face like a veil. Laying my hand on my stomach, I ran it across the black lace dress I wore where our son or daughter were growing inside of me. What will I tell our baby, Carter? How will he ever know his father and how much you loved him? A gloved hand assisted me to my feet, into the waiting arms of my brother-in-law. The touch of the stranger's hand had brought back the memory of Carter extending his hand to me when he had first met me. The kind gesture did not go unnoticed. As I turned to thank the guard, his head bowed. He stood silently at the end of the casket with his hands clasped in front of him. Thank you. My voice shook as I spoke. His head remained bowed, never saying a word. He shook his head in acknowledgment as we walked away. Landon stood strong, having to almost carry me at times. I was lost without him. Totally lost. Landon assisted me into the family car beside Beth, He had arranged for the family to ride in limos so they could be together. All I wanted was to be alone. Bella, I have to take care of something. I'll be back. After assuring that Beth and the children and I were settled, he returned to the gravesite. All I could think of was going home. And that's all I'm going to do for now. I'll be back with another part. Thank you and good evening.